So basically today we're going to jump into serializing specifically on Substack. I know that Eleanor has lots to share, and I have a few questions myself that have come up in client meetings that I've had. So we will try to cover as much as possible. We have about an hour. We might end up going over, but we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, go.
So, Eleanor, welcome. And maybe we can jump in and start with, can you share your experience on Substack? And I know that you've been serializing for a little while. Are you serializing before you publish, after you publish? Can you share a bit about how you use Substack to share your work?
Oh, yeah, I'm serializing before. There's one writer on here I know, Sam Suda, who's serializing after the event. I think it's quite interesting. If anybody's thinking about that, go to Sam Suda's Such a Pretty Fiction, it's called. But everyone else I know, including me, we're serializing before publication. I began by serializing my memoir, and I fell into it. The only reason I serialized that was because it was the only way to get it off my chest. I'd tried writing it a million ways and it never worked. And I'd just arrived on Substack. So I thought I'd just publish a postcard a day, and that turned into my memoir. So that I really just sort of tripped over and fell into serialization. And then I just thought, well, hang on a minute, I've got another novel in the drawer that we couldn't sell, which was In Judgment of Others. So that was the first novel I serialized. And I made all the mistakes that you can possibly make, including really not having it. It was finished, but I hadn't really edited it properly for serialization, which is something I can get into. And so I pressed publish on the first chapter, and I was probably only about 15 chapters ahead of myself. And it was like running in front of a moving train. I mean, it was exhilarating, but it was absolutely skin of my teeth. It was a white knuckle ride. So after that, I serialized Fallout, which amazingly got picked up last year by Empress Editions and is coming out next year.
Okay.
Yeah, which is incredibly exciting. And that's one of the, I count it as a success story. With In Judgment of Others, I published that myself because we'd already put it out as a publication and nobody wanted it. So I knew I had no choice on that one. But with Fallout, I did it properly. I serialized it properly. I produced an audio. I really learned all my lessons. It was much more of kind of showcase. And it got picked up. So these things can happen. Yeah.
But did you do voiceovers for Fallout for each post that you sent out? Is that how you did the audio?
Yeah, I did. That's one of the things you can do audio embed or you can do voiceover, and it depends whether you want the audio to be behind your paywall or not. If you do, you have to do audio embed. But if you're happy for it to go out for free, voiceover will always arrive at the top of your post. So no matter, even if you paywall the rest of your post, voiceover will always arrive for free. So I voiceovered the whole of Fallout, and I'm just now republishing the memoir and doing that. But with Fallout, I decided to try and be as professional as I could. So I bought a dead box. So it's literally a kind of a dead room box with one side missing. I'd sit on my desk. I bought a Rode mic, which Ben Wakeman usefully told me I had wrong backwards. Ben fixed that problem. I brought a proper pair of cans. I used GarageBand and a teleprompter. It was laborious. It took a long time. I had to record very early in the morning so there was no noise. But what it also helped was, again, I read all my work out loud. And by reading the audio, I could see where the problems were, again, in the text. So I really, really cleaned out bits of text. So yeah, I recorded a pretty professional one. For the memoir, which is just reposting, various people wanted me to put it back up on Substack. I'm just using voice memos. So the audio quality is way down. But I'm only doing it just for my own exercise, really. It's not a big deal. But the other thing I do, just to finish on audios, is I have them direct on an RSS feed, which means they are connected to Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So that your listeners, if they want to listen instead of read, but they don't want to have to click on each post, they can listen in a podcast and it runs sequentially one after the other, which people really like.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
So let's go back a bit with serialization. I'm really curious about how it structures differently for serialization versus if it were in a book chapter by chapter. Do you still serialize just chapter one and then chapter two and then chapter three, or do you format or arrange your content differently because it's a serialization on Substack?
I may be singular on this. I write literary fiction, and I'd noticed when I started editing novels for serialization that my chapter lengths were not equal. They weren't wildly different, but they weren't within a 500 word range, which is what they need to be if you're going to serialize on Substack. That's one of the things. The reason why you need to have your chapter lengths roughly the same length is because you need to make it super easy for people to read and come back each week. And we know when chapters are roughly the same length. And as anyone will notice, when you're on the home page of Substack, it'll tell you the minute length of each piece.
Mhm.
So you want that minute length, whatever it is. If it's 5 minutes, which is about about 3,000 words, you want that to be the same every week, because even that slight change will put people off.
Hmm.
So that's one of the things. But there may be writers listening who already have the same chapter lengths every time, in which case there's not much change there. The other thing that I notice, and again, this is why serialization is so brilliant for editing, it really, really sharpens the mind in terms of the plot structure and the rhythm and the pacing of your novel or memoir or nonfiction. Whatever. Even if you're writing nonfiction, it still has to have pacing, and it still has to have a narrative arc, really. And serialization, I'm very, very keen. Anyone who comes and works with me, students who come and learn about it, we do an awful lot of prep. And in that prep, we will lay out your chapters. So, for instance, In Judgment of Others had 30 chapters, all of the same length. And it was based on the 3-act structure, which is your classic movie structure.
Mhm.
And I was able to make sure by looking at that it was evenly balanced. So, the first 7 are in the first act and so on. And then the bulk are in the second act. And then we finish again the same length on the third. But I think all of these things are kind of after the event. A very well-paced, commercially written novel will already follow a lot of the rules of serialization, because you'll have that chapter length the same, that pacing, that rise to the midpoint, the even balance of Act 1 and Act 3. So there's not a huge amount of difference there. But I know for me, because I was writing literary fiction and I'm not a big planner, which is something I'm trying to fix now, it actually helped me to see the work as a whole and see my pacing, and see my narrative arc.
Yeah. So, yeah, this is great. And when you talk about I know that you want to mention the tech of Substack, like
Mm.
using Substack specifically for your serialization. What is your kind of best practices or things that you think are really important that maybe people don't think about? They just want to like throw it up there as posts that is perhaps a little bit different on Substack.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think one of the first things to remember why Substack is a brilliant place to serialize your memoir or novel is because it's a really great way of trying out work. There are millions and millions of people out there willing to read, and there are eyes that you can have on your work. So that's one of the first reasons to go and be on Substack and do it. And I'm sure there are other art platforms there, but Substack's the one I know. And yeah, there are some technical best practices. Um, I think having a streaming timetable is one of them, like making sure that you pin your streaming your index to your homepage, so that because people read at different times. Like I might start publishing. I'm prepping another novel to publish next year called The Moderns, and we'll probably start in about June. And I might start on June the 1st and publish the first chapter then, but some people might not come to it until September. So what I want is for people to be able to find it easily. So always pin your index to your homepage. In the run up to serializing, think very carefully about your artwork. That's your individual chapters and your overall look. I think, and people do it differently, but what I always teach is have the same visual every single time you post, because again, I need to be able to identify your work really simply. So I just use the same one, choose it and stick to it. That's your book cover. So in a sense, you're publishing your book cover at the beginning of every post as your look, but also your individual chapters. Choose before you begin. Are you going to have numbers? Are you going to have a title? Whatever you do the same thing. Is your subtitle going to be the name of your book each time? Is it going to be, do you know what I mean? It doesn't really matter what you choose, but be consistent. I mean, my big 3 with serializing is prep the hell out of it, be consistent, and keep it really simple. There's also choices you can make with Substack, again, on the tech. And I'm sure you have people, in fact, Adrian, I'm always sending people to you for this, whether you're going to have your serialization in a section, a group, or a new publication.
Yeah.
And there are pros and cons to all of this. But I mean, if it's in its own section, it means there's an automatic previous next button, which is helpful if you don't want to attach the previous chapter to the new chapter. If you already are known for, I don't know, writing about cookery, and now you want to serialize a novel that's nothing to do with it, should you start a whole new publication? So again, that's something you have to choose very early on and stick with it.
Yeah.
The paid, should it go paid or not, is always a big one. But just before we get onto that, because I know we will, just in terms of the other little tech bits, having a button to press if you don't want to go paid, but you want to do like buy me a coffee, that kind of thing. The reposting, knowing how much call to action to do on your Substack at the end. You don't want to overcrowd the page, but people like Ben Wakeman at the beginning of each chapter will do a catch-up paragraph before they get into the chapter. So there's a million things like that which I get into, which are all really important. They're all in the prep before you even start the first chapter. And if you can make all of those decisions before you start, you'll save yourself a whole load of hassle, because while it is live, there's also a million things to do. So you want to have made those decisions, keep it really simple, prep the hell out of it, and be consistent.
Yeah, that's great. And Ben says hi, by the way. He just joined.
Ben, are you there? Hey, Ben. Ben, I always, in my class, Ben is one of the Substacks that I always use. We do a Substack tour at the end, and I just take the class through the Substack who serialize really well. And Ben serializes really well. I don't get into content because that's for each of us to write our own content. But what I always point out with Ben is his visuals, his production values are really high. So anybody listening, if you want to go and look at how to do really high production values, consistency, easy to find, easy to navigate, table of contents, pin to homepage, just check out Ben Wakeman.
There we go. So before we do any serialization, we want to decide how we're going to serialize as far as the length, and whether or not we're doing a voiceover, kind of the consistent look as well with images, titles, and subtitles, whether or not we want to do previous chapter or next chapter and have a little bit, like you said, a little summary of the previous chapter. And also whether or not we want to do it for paid. So why don't we dive into that next? And that is to paywall or not to paywall.
Okay, sure thing. And let's remember, I want to go back and talk about word count, but let's talk about paywalling, because that will affect your streaming timetable. So paywalling, yeah, I get asked this a lot. And particularly those new to serializing their work. Perhaps they haven't been published yet at all. Perhaps they have. But there's a sense, and I totally understand it, there's a sense of real protectiveness over the work and not wanting to give it away for free. That's always the phrase that's used. And this really, really depends on your ambition and your experience and what else you've done on Substack. So if you've got 10,000 subscribers and you're trying out a new piece of work and you are intending to submit it to Big Five, then absolutely put it behind a paywall, because your ambition is not to get eyes on it. It's just to give it a little bit of a run around the park, and you know that at least 1,000 of those 10,000 are going to get eyes on it, and that's fine. Let's go to the other end of the scale. If you're completely new to Substack, you've never published anything, you've written this fantastic novel, you haven't put it out to submission in the trad world yet, and you just want to try, you're market testing the work and thinking maybe I'm going to get picked up. This depends whether you eventually have an ambition to submit it to Big Five, an indie publisher, or publish it yourself. So if you are an emerging writer, never done it before, low subscriber count, and you think you'll be an independent artist at the end of it and publish it yourself, then do not drop it behind a paywall, because you just won't get eyes on it. One of the things that I have to talk about in class is managing expectations. And the truth of it is, you might get a real big flurry if you've done lots of prep and you've done lots of momentum building and you've sent out teaser posts and all the rest of it. You might get way bigger numbers than you were imagining for that first post, but I promise you they're going to drop off. And that's not a comment on your work. It's just a comment on how our brains work. So if your ambition is to build your name, build your publication, market test the work, see what's out there, do it for free. If you can't stomach that, then you can drop it behind a paywall, say after 24 hours or a week or so. I have always put mine out for free. There's a couple of reasons to that. One of them is that the last 2 novels I published on Substack, and in fact the one coming out in June next year, all 3 of those had already done the rounds of Big Five submissions in the UK, and all 3 of those had failed. So I knew that I didn't have to risk that. Any Big Five publisher will not accept your work if it's been serialized anywhere online, more than 10%. So you can get away with 10%, but over 10% you can't. So you could publish 10% for free and then put the rest behind a paywall if you were thinking of submitting to a Big Five. If you're submitting to an independent publisher like Gally Beggar, Sam Jordasen's on here, and I had a chat with him about it, he's not worried about a novel being serialized for free on Substack. He will still read it as a submission and think about it, as long as when you submit it, you take it down off Substack.
Mm.
So really, before you even make that kind of paywall, paid time wall decision, have a think about what your ambition for that piece of work is. Be very clear about it. And if you've got questions, like, for instance, you think, well, I'd like to submit it to Gally Beggar, then go onto Gally Beggar's website, see what they've written about it. If they haven't said anything, send Sam a DM and say, can you just confirm whether this is okay? Do you know what I mean? Do your homework before you do it.
Yeah.
In the main, the people I work with, they are emerging writers, and they just want to have that thrill of getting the work out there and seeing, fingers crossed, if an editor, and they are watching, will pick it up. And I would really encourage you to just let it out the gate and let it out for free and see what happens, and make your money in other ways. I can also tell you that all of the books that I've serialized for free on Substack, I've then gone on to publish, and they've all sold. And they've all sold to people, as well as people who didn't read it serialized. They've sold to people who'd already read it as a serialized novel on Substack, and they wanted the physical copy in their hand. So you can still sell your book.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. So it really sounds like it's very dependent on what your goals are as
Totally
a
goal
writer.
dependent. Yeah.
Yeah.
And your expectations. So, you always, all writers anyway, when you're at the publishing point, whether you're publishing on Substack or you're sending it out on submission, it's really helpful to manage your expectations. And if you can I taught a class the other day, and I said, if you're serializing over maybe 8 months or a year, and you're an emerging writer and you've never done it before, if you end up with a steady 10 people reading you every week, be proud. That's fantastic. It's really hard. And I mean 10 people reading it on the day you publish, because you can't possibly know how many people are reading it, way down the line. When you're on chapter 17, they've just started on chapter 1. So those numbers might sound crazy small, but actually that kind of consistency is really, really hard to achieve, because as we all know on Substack, there's a million things to read. And to get that kind of loyalty is a real win. So, manage what you feel is success, and then really, really celebrate it when you get it. Yeah. But maybe we should talk about word count, because that's the other thing that's important to understand when let's say you've edited your book for serialization, you haven't posted anything yet, but you've figured out you've got 30 chapters and they're 2,000 words each. Okay, well that's six, and you're going to publish that's 60. Do you know what I mean? That's 60 posts if you're going to do that every week. Is that right?
Right.
My math is terrible. Whatever it is. I mean, the novel that I'll be publishing in June, The Moderns, will probably take me 8 months to publish. And I spoke to someone the other day and she reckoned it was going to take her about a year. So the question you have to ask yourself is, if my word count is over, well, here's the thing to remember. If your word count for each chapter is over 3,000 words, you're unlikely to be able to get readers on a weekly basis, because nobody is going to read more than 3,000 words a week of one post. They're just, unless you're really well known, they're not going to do it if you're an emerging writer. So the received wisdom, again, and this is to emerging writers, of your first serialization, is to get your word count to about somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 per chapter.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe 2.5 if you can get away with it, but I would say 1,500 to 2,000 and publish weekly. If you really can't do that and your chapter lengths are longer, 4,000 words, then consider posting every other week. For the memoir, they were 1 minute, so that was 300 words. So I could get away with posting every day. So you can see there's a sliding scale there, word length, how often you can post and how often you can expect people to read. But that, and then figure out how long it's going to take to do the entire thing, because there's a certain fatigue happens as well. I think that's what happens. If you start posting before you're ready, it's all incredibly exciting. And about 2 months in, you just think, shit, I've got another 8 months of this and I haven't quite figured. It's a long time. It's a long time. That's why you really, really have to prep before you begin.
Yeah. So it sounds like it would probably not be a good idea to be like, I am going to write my memoir first draft on Substack and send it
Like
out as
I
I
did.
go.
Like I did. There's only one really good reason. I don't know if Simon Jones is on this call, but Simon Jones writes Triverse Universe, and he always argues with me about this, and I totally see his point. There's only there's two really good reasons to start publishing your serialized novel before you finished writing it. And that is if it's the only way to get that work up on its feet.
Mm.
So Simon found that he had this piece of work and he just could not finish it. He was procrastinating. He was doing something else. He knew it was a good piece of work, but he just needed a rocket underneath him. And serialization is a rocket. So he decided just to press publish, knowing that he didn't know where this was going. 246 chapters later, he's just about, but that's the other thing. It's about genre. So Simon writes speculative fiction, and he writes in a way that you might produce a long-running Netflix series that has micro plots within a major narrative arc. So he was able to stand up individual chapters that had a beginning, middle, and end within a greater whole that he could think about later that he hadn't really figured out. So those are the two good reasons. If structurally you're writing basically a mini series, and that tends to suit genre fiction, or if you just cannot get that novel finished and you need to put a fire underneath you, then do it. But if you do that, know that it's not going to be your best work and you will probably crash halfway through, which is fine because you will have got it going and seeing the problems. You'll have to pull it, and then you'll start again. Or like me, I just don't want anyone to read anything that I think is half-baked. So, that's the only, for me, when I teach, I'm teaching what I imagine to be literary fiction writers and memoir writers. And I always, the very, very first thing in the class is finish the damn book.
Right.
Always.
Yeah. So I want to go back to paywalling for a sec, because I just had a follow-up question. And that is, if you've been writing posts on Substack for a while, you have, say, 1,000 or up to 5,000 people. So not like a huge following, but you have a following. They've been reading your free posts. Would it make sense to launch your book as a paid option for your Substack? Or is that still like, should you see what your audience thinks of that first? Like, what would be your recommendations around that?
You could see what your audience feel, but in all honesty, that's no guarantee they will follow through. Probably if you say, I'm thinking of launching this paywalled, what do you reckon? A load of people will go, great, fantastic. But how many that will translate into paid is quite another matter. Um, Again, I'm going to harp on about it. It really depends on your ambition. If you want eyes on
Mhm.
it, don't paywall it. But if you want to just experiment to see how many people would pay for your work, then obviously paywall it and find out. And you might find that you paywall it, you post 5 or 6 weeks worth of chapters, you find your engagement is just not enough for what your ambition really is. I mean, it might reveal what your ambition is. You might think your ambition is to see if paywalling works, but actually what you discover is what you really want is eyes on your work, and it doesn't work. So then you can just take the paywall down. Those kind of moments can feel a bit like, oh God, I've made a mistake. But the truth of it is, I mean, people notice initially, but they don't really notice. Do you know what I mean? I always say, in the best way possible, nobody cares. We're all just thinking about our own work. So if you make a decision and think, I've done that. I started paywalling my obsessive diary for a while. And then I took the paywall down again because I was just like, do you know what? The truth of it is, I just really love people reading my work, and I just wasn't getting enough people reading my work. So I might put it back up again at some point. I don't know. Um, but yeah, always ambition, and mostly people want eyes on their work. That's what I've gleaned from this, last few years of talking to people. That's what gives you the thrill. And,
Yeah.
if you do want an editor to see it, you absolutely have to put it out for free.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I have a question about serializing post publication. I don't know if
Mm.
with anyone like that, but say someone has self published a book on Amazon or on an indie publisher, self publishing. Mostly I've seen it with self publishing. And then afterwards, they start to kind of like serialize the book, or excerpts from the book saying, like, hey, if you want to read the whole thing, you don't want to wait for the next chapter to arrive, check out the link below and purchase your
Yeah.
own copy. Have you seen people doing that?
Yeah, I'm
And
doing that. I'm doing that
okay.
with the memoir right now. Yeah, I think that's not a bad idea. And I think Sam Suda is such a pretty fiction. I think that's exactly what he's doing. He's like, okay, how can I use this as a marketing tool? So I think such a pretty fiction has been published traditionally, although I'm not sure. I'll have to check up on that. So I don't know what his conversation with his publisher was, if that's the case. But you're right, Adrian. A lot of people who choose to do it that way will have been independent authors and published it themselves. And they might think, yeah, I want to boost sales. So why don't I serialize it? You have to be very careful on proofs, obviously. It depends how long ago you published it, because I find invariably I'll go back and look at work and want to start editing it. So obviously you can't do that if you're selling it. It has to be exactly as
Okay.
you
Yeah.
published it, because invariably editing it will improve it, and then that's not quite what you're selling. So I would
Right.
just say be mindful of that. But that's exactly what I'm doing with the memoir. The memoir I put out, I serialized it, and then I published it myself because I knew I couldn't get a deal on it. And anyway, it was just really for me and to send to some friends, and that was fine. And then it sold well, so that was great. And then I was chatting with Hamish actually on a live, and he was like, "Put it back up. They should all be up." So I was like, "Oh, okay." So the only downside about that is that it is, as I'm putting it up again, it's going back into people's inboxes, some of whom have already read it. So sorry about that, everyone. But but I'm sort of posting it periodically. But on that, as opposed to when I first serialized it, when it was just going out very, very plain. Now, when I serialize it, the masthead is my now existing book cover with all the blurbs.
Right.
Beneath it is a link, buy the book, which goes directly to my website where you can buy the book in whichever territory you're in. and then a call to action to subscribe to me to support independent artists. So yeah, I think serializing after the event, why not? But it's a marketing tool
Right.
in rather than a trying out, rather than a market test. So, do you know what I mean? That's a slight
Yeah.
difference there. But essentially, you're just getting eyes on your work and, hoping that people will buy the book. But actually, just thinking about that, I'm planning on serializing just the first half of the book, and the recovery diaries, which are the second half of the book, I probably won't serialize. So yeah, that's the hook. If you want to read the rest of it,
Yeah.
buy the book.
I'm working with one client right now who's re-serializing. He serialized on Substack and then self-published, and now he's re-serializing.
Yeah, exactly the
And
same.
yeah, but he's just doing excerpts with a
Right,
voiceover for the second
right.
serialization with a little bit of
Okay.
extra story in the voiceover part. So we're trying to like trying out different things together and stuff, but it's
Okay.
really,
And is that
yeah,
successful in terms of
we're
eyes on the
just
page?
starting we're just starting the second serialization. So
Yeah. I
I
mean,
would
that's
have
a
to
great
see
idea.
later.
Yeah, that's a great idea, and I think I think that works too. I think there are no wrong answers actually when it comes to this kind of marketing, like the serializing after the event. You could also, and I did this for Fallout before it was picked up, but you could do this after the event. I published companion pieces, so
Mm,
Fallout set at Greenham Commons, so I was able to publish YouTube clips of the actual events that were happening where I set the novel. Or you can also, after the event, like now, like hold live Substacks, live conversations with people and advertise it that way. So I think Substack offers all kinds of avenues for market. This is what we're talking about, for marketing your work
yeah,
before or after the event. And I think the wise author uses all of those because it's a super busy world out there, and there's a million things to read. And this is the other thing I always say, particularly to British people, but I don't know, maybe this applies across the world. They'll say, "Oh, I don't know, should I like post it on Notes?" And I always say, look, no one else is going to advertise your book. Sweet
yeah,
Jesus,
yeah,
you post it on Notes, like blow that trumpet every day if you have to, because you're the one doing it. So if you're serializing after the event, just go all out. Yeah,
yeah,
do everything you can. Companion pieces, live events, Q&As is always another really, really good one for people who have read it.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. That's great. All right. So, I would like to hear, like, I don't have a ton of questions because I don't have a lot of experience, but I would love to hear more about what you think is important for new Substackers, more that you have to share, and also some success stories that you found that you think is really great that people should check out as examples, like you were mentioning before.
Well, Sally Reed is the other one I always say, go and check out her work. Um, who else do I take people to? Jonathan Foster, I think. No, Jonathan Reed. I send people there. Ben, I send people there. Sam Suda. Success stories. Well, Kim Warner, her memoir Unfixed was first serialized on Substack, and that was picked up by the same publisher as me, actually, Empress Editions, and that's coming out October 21st, which is very exciting. I'm going to the launch in New York. So these things absolutely do happen. I think one of the things that Kim did really successfully was that consistency of visual and
Mhm.
word count. Obviously, her content, really added up to it as well. But it was a story that really hooked us all in. I think I started reading Kim Warner's memoir on Substack maybe 3 years ago when she was first serializing it. And I think back then we weren't even calling it serialization. She was just like publishing her memoir. But there was a visual. I remember the visual element to it, which worked really well. And the same with Ben. I mean, I met Ben Wakeman just because his visuals were so good. And he does a great what happened last week kind of run up posts as well. I've just been looking at my class I teach, and I've just noticed one thing that serializers need to be really aware of, and I call it the annoyance of formatting differences.
Okay.
You have to be aware that there's a distinction. I'm going to read out this little clip I've got here. There will be a distinction between your email version of a chapter, its phone app version, and the version you hold on Scrivener or Word or whichever one you're using. The latter two you can change retrospectively, whereas the first you can't. You can't. And the offline versions can obviously flow into EPUB and KDP versions. So don't try and flow your Substack version into KDP or EPUB because it will be completely corrupted. And remember that if people are reading on their phones and they're reading on their laptops, and the formatting will be different. And that's the other thing that I've noticed when audios go direct to the RSS feed. Obviously, the audio will give the exactly what's written at the top. So if you don't want the what happened last week bit of the story to be there, you can't do that. What you can do with Ben, what Ben did again very well, is he had a kind of fixed call to action at the beginning of each post, of each chapter in his audio, which really encouraged people to subscribe to him, explained what he was doing as an independent author, all that kind of stuff. So again, I know I keep going back to it, but your I'm just looking at my pages here.
Yeah.
Your prep is absolutely everything. Yeah, and keeping it really simple. The other thing I always ask my students when they come to class to ask themselves for each chapter, I ask them, does each chapter move the story forward, deepen character, have the same approximate word count, and leave the reader wanting more? And so when you're in prep and you've divided it up into equally word counts of equal length, ask yourself those 4 questions, because you still have to think about it as a literary fiction or as a fiction writer, and make sure that it's hooking your readers in. And that applies as well to that very first chapter. Serialization is really, it has to start with a bang and leave that, especially that end of that first chapter. What I always say is when I'm reading someone's first chapter, I want to almost fall off the cliff of their full stop at the end. Like I'm still going and they're, whoa, stop like that, because that's what makes me want to read the next one. So that kind of rhythm and tension is even more important when you're serializing than when you're published, because at least, if I'm holding your book and I've gone and bought it, I'm probably going to read the next chapter anyway. But if I've just read your first chapter on Substack, I've no reason to click on the same one next week, unless you left me, with a major sense of, I want to know what happens next. So you do have to be a lot more commercial, I think, in your thinking around your rhythm and your plotting. And those doing it, I think one of the things, and I noticed this with other Substackers who are serializing, like Sally Reed and like Simon Jones, and like Ben, although I think Ben wouldn't call himself a genre fiction writer. Most of the people serializing on Substack, unless they're writing memoirs, they are writing genre fiction. And I think genre fiction writers in the as it were, the published trad world, the outside world or the paperback world, they've really kind of, they've stormed a path to being independent artists and publishing work themselves. And they do it very, very well on Substack as well. They've really, really understood how that kind of rhythm and that hooking people in. I've never met a speculative fiction writer who wasn't brilliant at marketing. There's something about that genre which allows those writers to really understand that very quick moving hook. But what I'm not seeing on Substack is literary fiction writers like me. I'm always searching. Sam is one of them. And Ben writes literary fiction, but there is definitely a speculative edge to it. So I would love to see more literary fiction writers on there. And it's a harder sell to serialize literary fiction, because almost by definition, well, I want to say it's slower. It's not really slower, but it is deeper. It has much more depth. and you can't lean on those commercial tricks that are so available to speculative and genre fiction writers. You have to be really good to get people to stay, not to arrive, but to stay every week and be there. So I think it's a much higher test in terms of getting eyes on your work. It's tougher. But I really, really want literary fiction writers to be on there serializing original work, because I really want Substack's reputation as a place for editors to come and see the best new work. I want that reputation to grow, and the only way that's going to do that is if other literary fiction writers are on there serializing their work. So I really, really encourage anybody who's listening who does write literary fiction to do it, because we need to build our presence within the fiction world on Substack. I really want us to build our presence.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Question for you. Would you consider our memoirs closer to literary fiction or speculative fiction? Or does it depend on the person maybe? But in that idea of depth, and maybe a little more difficult to keep your audience coming back for more. How would you place memoir along that?
Well, I'll come at this question in a different way. How I define literary fiction is depth and free of cliche. Those are the two qualities. Okay, so nothing wrong with cliche. There's a million brilliant non-literary fiction works out there that just use great tropes to get the story moving, and that's fantastic. But literary fiction is free of cliche and has depth. So memoir can be absolutely that, and in fact is by majority that, because it's telling a personal story, and every personal story is completely unique. So I think, I think memoir, I mean, there's two people I think I found on Substack who have now become friends, and I met them through their memoirs because they were so fascinating. They are Kim Warner and Lisa Kennedy Jones. And I would never have found their memoirs in Waterstones because I didn't know their names. So why would I pick up their memoir? It's very unlikely, back in the day. I think Actually, no, I think Elisa, she did traditionally publish her memoir, but she had a kind of track, so she was able to get a deal. But, and again, with mine, there's no reason, if Kim had sent hers out to the big five traditional, she's not, fantastically famous. The marketing would have said, "Oh, who is this? We'll never sell it," and she wouldn't have got a deal, and we would have lost out on a brilliant memoir. But the fact is, I think the most brilliant memoirs are the ones that go deep into that personal story, and hers does exactly that, and Elisa's does exactly that. And I've read a number where, I find everybody fascinating, and so to stumble upon a human being who has this extraordinary story and tells it incredibly well was just a joy, and that goes for both of them. And I would hazard a guess that there are plenty of people listening to this and in recording who have great stories and can tell them really well. And they might be thinking, well, who's going to be interested? Cherry Coombe is another one. She's brilliant. They may well be thinking, who's going to be interested? But the fact is, human stories are fascinating. I think they're always fascinating. And telling it, having the guts to tell it and getting it off your chest, it is a service to the world, I think. And I know with my memoir, I struggled with that material for 20 years. I knew I had a story, but I did not know how to tell it. And eventually I serialized it. And the joy of not having to carry it around in my head for the rest of my life was just off the scale. Now I'm going back and looking at it, and I don't even remember writing it. And I'm reading bits, and I'm like, my God, I'd completely forgotten that happened, and that happened, and that happened.
Right.
So I really encourage memoirists out there who are listening, who are thinking of serializing, do it for yourselves. Do it to get it off your chest and onto the page. And what you might be surprised to find that people really want to hear your story. And it's an absolute joy, because of that, their examples are plenty. of that happening on Substack, and Kim Warner and Cherry Coombe are just Cherry writes fiction, but it's closely based on memoir. Um, are absolutely proven that we're fascinated. So don't believe the voices that say, "Who am I to?" Just put them aside and
Yeah.
say, "No, no, here I am, and I will." Yeah.
Yeah. And how about nonfiction? Have you worked with anyone that is serializing nonfiction um, on Substack, whether that's like self-help or any kind of
Right.
topic that they're really into?
Yeah, no, I haven't yet, actually. And I'd be really interested to work with somebody who is doing that, and just to look at the vagaries of how that differs in terms of how they serialize. I mean, some of the basic rules will always be the same. There needs to be a point. What, what's it about, and why are you
Mhm.
writing it? And that point has to govern the narrative arc, because it has to have a beginning, middle, and end, whether you like it or not. If it's a serialized, say, a serialized nonfiction, this is a good example. um, Often the best serialized nonfictions kind of slightly, um, they cross over with memoir. I'm just thinking now, there's a great woman whose name escapes me, who writes about wild swimming. And I'm pretty sure there's a kind of memoir element in that. So she's talking about wild swimming, and she's telling the story of it, but she's also telling the story of how it helped her and how she came to do it.
Right.
So I think that integration between, if you feel you've got something that you want to share with the world, you think it'll be helpful, you want to structure it as a book, which you eventually see as having a paperback or hardback cover. That integration between broad advice and personal story, why it worked for you, is a tried and tested, and it allows the reader to focus and center the bigger advice on the personal story. So it really helps to anchor the work that's happening, and
Right.
yeah, it's worth doing.
Yeah, that's a really great point because I know, like, I think that's maybe the difference between writing a series of articles on Substack and writing
Mm.
an actual serialized book. For example, Amba just joined, Amba Gale. Hi, Amba.
Hi,
And
Amber.
she is serializing her book, The Heart of Sacred Listening, on
Mm.
Substack. And it's really the story of it that makes it the book,
Mm.
like the advice that she shares is amazing, but she could
Mm.
share that advice as just an article, but the stories
Mm.
are kind of what seems to pull it into wanting to read the next part, right? Like whose story is shared next, or how did this story end or continue in the next part? So,
Sounds
that's a really
great.
good point.
I'll Amber, if you remember, tag me on one of your posts. I'll come and check you out. Sounds brilliant. And yeah, that's exactly because we're storytellers as a species. That's how
Yeah.
we make sense of the world. We tell stories, and we need to anchor this wild and unbelievable material world that's around us in something, and we anchor it and center it in ourselves, obviously, and in the stories we tell about ourselves and the world in which we live in. And without that, it's just a load of unfixed unanchored, floating words that are kind of meaningless in that sense. The storytelling gives the words meaning, and we need that personal touch, and we need that very small essence to it. One of the things that I'm working on, 3 novels, and what all 3 are doing is they're taking very human stories, so small human stories, but putting them against big political backdrops.
Mm.
And by doing that, it allows those big political backdrops, with all the points that those backdrops need to make, to be focused in on the movement of somebody in a kitchen. And that allows our brains to relate and then move through and see the big picture, because we've got somewhere to anchor it to. So Amber's absolutely right. And imagine that she did that instinctively, because it is an instinct that we all know that we need to start and end with the human, even if we go all the way around the block talking about something much bigger than us.
Yeah. So, one thing that I would like you to touch on, if you can, is when we're serializing our books, how can we get new people to come and look? What are some really great avenues that you've found for people to come to gain new eyes on their Substack? They're not just sharing their book into the void.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, one of the things I would say, every time you post, you share it as a note, but you also link in that note a link to your table of contents every single week, or even twice or three times a week, or even hell, every day on notes. You could just share your table of contents, because at some point someone's going to go, who is this person who keeps sharing their table? I'm going to have a look. So absolutely, that make it super, super easy for people to find you. And whenever you link, whenever you've posted a chapter, you have the opportunity to share it to notes, but add to that post a link to your table of contents, because obviously these are new readers, and you've just shared chapter 17, where you definitely don't want them to start there. You want them to start at the table of contents, where every week, and this is the thing, one of the many things that you have to do when you're live, is update your table of contents every week. So
Yeah.
you live link. You can either write it as you go, or have it written and then just live link each chapter as you go. But you have to do that every single time. Make sure that people can always find. So that's one of the ways to do it. So share your table of contents, share the relevant chapter that's just gone out, share it across other social media platforms so you can cross-pollinate. I use Instagram and LinkedIn for some reason. I don't know why I do that. I think that's because of an automatic button, and sometimes Blue Sky, automatic button. The other great rule about getting people to come to your Substack, read your work, and hopefully subscribe is to do the same for other people. Really engage with other Substacks that you find fascinating. They don't have to be anything to do with what you're writing. They just have to fascinate you. I always imagine that Substack is a festival. You can't possibly see every act. And when it's your turn to get on stage, you can't possibly expect everyone to find you and see you. But if you always make sure you seek out the acts and the substacks that you love, and they might be completely random, and when you find them, you do a little bit every day. You read them, you like them, you restack them, you send them on to other people, and then when it's your turn up on stage to send out your work, you will get that back in the law of returns. That will come back, but only, and I feel this, although I'm sure you can be a lot more strategic than I am. Be honest about what you're doing. So I would never restack and like and sing about a Substack that I couldn't give a hoot about just because I thought I was going to get something from it.
Mhm.
That it's just not my way. There's two reasons I wouldn't do that. One is it just makes me feel sick, and the other reason is
Yeah.
I simply couldn't sustain it. I couldn't
Yeah.
sustain it, and that kind of fakery, I think, will always be revealed at some point or other, because this is a long game, and you do need to sustain who you are on Substack. So whoever you are on Substack, make that who you really are, because then
Yeah.
sustaining it won't be a crazy effort, because there's already enough work to do. So really be yourself. Find the Substacks that really make you laugh and cry and engage, and whatever the thing is that you're looking for. And they can be nothing to do with what you're doing at all. Totally different genre, whatever, it doesn't matter. Really engage with them, because all of their readers will be vastly wide readers who will read all kinds of things. Engage with them, recommend them, and really put your energy in to other people's work, and it will come back. But do remember, its growth is slow. There was a period of time about, I don't know, maybe it was about 6 or 8 months ago, when Substack had this kind of explosion, and all of us experienced this crazy rocket in subscribers. I was like, oh my God, it's just, I was like 1,000 a year, and then it was going, what the hell? About 3 months ago, everybody fell off a cliff. Tom Cox left. He just was like, what has happened? And it was because that rise was fake. I mean, they were
Mm,
real people, but they weren't your real, like they hadn't really taken the time to read your work and really love your work. Because when people do, what my experience is, they're super loyal. I'm super loyal. I'm constantly, my reading list is building and building and building because even if I don't have time to read their work, I love them. So I'm not going to unsubscribe because I love them, and it's built slowly. So
yeah,
again, manage your expectations
yeah,
and know that building slowly means you're going to keep those people. Whereas a crazy meteoric rise, and the chances are half of them won't even have read a post and they'll leave as quickly.
yeah. I've noticed that with when people go viral on notes, using some of the clickbaity notes that are kind of popular sometimes, uh, they'll get like a huge number of subscribers or of likes or comments on the note. But then when you go to their post, there's nothing happening, right? So
Yeah.
these people
Yeah.
just start
I know. I mean,
subscribing, but yeah.
yeah, I think there are certainly people out there, and that meets their needs. They want to go viral on notes. They want loads of things. They want to have and that's fine. If that, again, it's about being very clear what your ambition is and who you are, with no
Right.
shame at all. Right? And if you are that person, you're very strategic, you just want viral notes, you want to have at least 204, 1 million, whatever the thing it is, fine. That is who you are, and you will be able to sustain it. But if you're not like me, who simply cannot, for the life of me, post strategic notes that are going to I don't even bother. So I
Yeah.
know my growth is going to be slow. And it is. It's super slow. My growth is super slow. But
Yeah.
the people who like me really like me, and I really like them. And that makes me happy. So that, I know myself. And the truth of it is of course, I would love, triple the amount of subscribers, because I know that means editors will know that I am a safe bet when it comes to buying and marketing my book. That's the only reason I keep growing my numbers.
Mhm.
But there's only a certain amount of people you can actually have a relationship with. And I think fundamentally Substack is about relationship. That's
Yeah.
what makes me super happy. So, but I mean, God, we're all only human. We're living in a world. I'm just writing an article about the horror of being taught that this is purely a material world and nothing outside of it. And therefore, I'm measured by numbers. And it does everybody's head in. So give yourself a break. If you're feeling depressed because you're not getting enough likes, give yourself a break, because we all go through it and it's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. The
It's
thing
all
that
right.
I love doing is um, going back through my posts and looking at the reader stats.
Yeah.
So who's
That,
reading this? And the email
yeah.
addresses, sometimes it's like, oh, this is like
Yeah.
an old friend from like 10,
Yeah.
15 years ago that I haven't talked to in forever. And they read every single post that I send out,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And that
And they
can
may
just
not like
be
it.
so
That's what I
encouraging.
find. Exactly. I find that, and that's a real bit of data to look at. And I find
Mhm.
I've got loads of friends who read my posts in an email. They're not even on Substack. So they can't like it. They can't press any buttons. They're reading it on email. They're loving it. And there'll be a moment when I'll just be like, I was talking to a friend the other day, and I was like, oh, maybe I won't do the diary anymore. And she was like, what are you talking about? Don't stop the diary. I read it every day. And I was like, do you? I had no idea at all. So remember
Yeah.
that. Again, there are plenty of people reading that you will never even know their names, but they love you.
Yeah.
So keep the faith. But yes, if just to go back to your original question, building subscribers, getting eyes on posts, definitely, posting notes at a steady rate, posts that notes that you mean and you enjoy writing, it does produce results. I believe engaging with other people is a much longer term strategy that's got real kind of heart to it. So
Mhm.
do that. Put in as much as you want to get out.
Yeah, that's great. So a couple times today, you mentioned your class And so I'm wondering
Yeah.
if you want to share with people about the classes and the different that work that you do around serializing.
Oh, I'd love to. So up until now, I've been hosted by London Writers Salon and Arvin and Retreat West, teaching serialization outside of Substack. But, and again, you see, this is me. I'm not a strategist. I really should make a post about this, but I am available. I'm available to teach serialization to individuals, or if a group of you want to get together, we can put together a class, and I can run it over Zoom. So anybody listening to this live or in recording, if you want to have a proper deep dive, it's about an hour, hour and a half. An hour and a half is really what we need to get into it. If you want to go one-to-one, I can really look at your work and figure out how to move you forward. And if there's a bunch of you who want to get together, maybe a class of 5 or 10 of you, we can put together a Zoom and teach a serialization class like that. They're really fun. It's super technical. I've mentioned quite a lot of the technical stuff today, but what I'll do, I won't be looking at content at all. I'll give you a very basic kind of where you need to be at when you begin thinking about serialization in terms of the state of your book.
Mhm.
And then it's all technical, every single technical aspect of Substack that you need to be thinking about before you press publish on your first post. And then all the things you need to be doing while you're live. And then the things that you can do when you've finished to help boost all of that work that you've just spent a year serializing on Substack. So please do get in touch. You can DM me. There's a contact form on my website, or you can just send me a public note. And I'd love to work with you.
That's great. And what is your website again?
My website is eleanoranstruther.com.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, it's good. And if you need help implementing the tech that
Oh, yeah.
Eleanor tells you about, come to me.
And every time I teach, I have a section where I encourage everyone to go to Adrian, because
Oh,
literally, absolutely, because well, as you know, I had a whole confusion around
yeah.
the dates. I can't remember which book it was now, but the dates were all in the wrong order. Again, sections, groups, or a whole new publication, those sort of things, Adrian will sort out. I have Adrian on permanent administrator on my Substack.
Yeah.
And she often jumps in and just figures things out for me. So, Adrian, you are actually part of my class.
Thank you. Yeah. Great. And I feel like we're kind of wrapping up here, but is there anything else that's really important that you think that I have not asked that you would like to share?
I think just that serialization, it's a white knuckle ride, but it's also incredibly fun. It's really great. I think for so many of us, our work languishes and we don't know how to get it out there. And obviously, we know the state of the publishing world. I don't know if anyone's read Sam Georgeson's post about the cost of producing a book, but it's pretty stark. And there are thousands of brilliant writers out there who, through no fault of their own, are having trouble getting published. And serialization means that beautiful piece of work that you have worked so hard on can stand up and have its day in the sun and be read by us, so you're doing us all a favor. And the thrill of when you've done, and prep will take a couple of months in the way I teach it. Like, I don't teach for a couple of months, but what I will tell you to do will take you a couple of months to do. So it's a lot of work to get to that point, recording all your audios. But at that moment, when you're ready and you've done all that stuff and your beautiful bit of work is ready to go and you press publish, the thrill is off the scale. And it's the prize, it's amazing. And I think one of the things I experience is there's such a sense of like foreboding, what's going to happen? Should it be free? All these big worrying questions. But the truth of it is, when you press publish for the first time and it goes out into the world and people start reading and getting back to you, you suddenly, at least I suddenly was like, oh my God, this is the win. What happens after this? Actually, I don't really care. I'd forgotten what it's like when I first did it, because I'd had 3 books turned out, like failed at submission. I'd forgotten the thrill of being read. And the brilliant thing about serialization, as opposed to publishing a book, which, can take 18 months and then you'll probably never meet the people who are reading it unless you're doing events. is that in real time, you get to watch people's response to your
Yeah.
novel, and you get to see them in the comments having discussions with each other about what's happening in that chapter. And especially if you're using unreliable witnesses as your characters, you have to keep really quiet and not say anything when you see your readers going off and exactly in the wrong direction that you've been sending them. So there are all these elements that are just such fun, and they're so rewarding. And you will likely forget all those other worries about a publisher picking you up and people because when people start reading your work, it's the best, man. So
Yeah.
do it, and come. And if you don't know how to do it, come to me, and I'll teach you.
And Matthew just commented and said he totally loves the serialization of a memoir in 65 postcards. Eleanor,
Oh,
such a pleasure to read it each day and to be lifted by it. Thank you. It's the best thing to land in my inbox. So,
oh, see, thanks, Matthew.
totally
That's
worth
so
it.
great. It's so great. Oh, love you all. I mean, I'm a reader, and I love readers. You know, this is what you finish the book. When someone reads your book, there's eyes on it. They finish the work. That's why we need to get the work out there in whichever way. And serialization is, it's a thrill ride, and it's the best way to do it. And you're doing us a favor because we get to read your work.
Mhm. Yeah, that's great. That is a great message. And thank you so much, Eleanor, for making the time today and coming and sharing with us about serialization. I hope that anyone who's in the call today that's been thinking about it will reach out to you if they need a little extra help,
Yep.
and we'll get their story out to the world. It's great.
That's right. Please do get in touch. I do 15 minutes for free. Just if you just be like, oh, I've got this problem, we'll just do that for free. And after that, there are some charges and I'll go through it with you. So just DM me.
Yeah, that's awesome. All
Okay.
right. Thank you, everyone,
All
for
right.
joining us. And thank you. Shannon says, I never would have completed my
Please do my
manuscript.
manuscript. There, exactly. Yeah. See, that's a good reason. Like you needed a rocket, and serialization gave you a rocket. And that's a good
Yeah.
reason to do it before you finish. So good. Well done. Glad. Well done, Shannon.
All right.
Okay. Brilliant.
Until
Thanks,
next time,
Adrian.
everybody. Thank you, Eleanor, and
Thanks so
have a
much.
lovely day.
You
We,
too. Thanks everyone for coming.
all right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.